This is Mete Yurtsever. I'm the host of Formula for Creating Value podcast. Today we reach out to Dubai, and my special guest is Piotr Gryko, a senior partner at Hofstede Insights, Middle East, North Africa. Welcome, Piotr.
Thank you very much for having me. Hello, Mete.
Thanks for being with us today. So briefly again about you to our audience. You studied international business at university, then you started up your own company in Poland, and then you moved on to be a consultant in Sweden, and for about 10 years. And okay, and during that period, you came across the culture topic and with Hofstede Insights. And since then, you're an expert on organizational culture and transition management. So is there anything missing?
I think that this is a pretty precise description of my path and the rough way into culture through different culture shocks that I experienced myself.
All right. Well, Sweden shouldn't have been such a big shock, I would say.
Oh, for a Pole, yes, it is. Definitely, it is. It's a country that is located very close by, but culturally, it's a totally different continent, I'd say.
I see. All right. So, where to start? I mean, what is culture? And let's start from there.
Yeah, culture is a super interesting topic because when you think culture, when you say culture, you think something fluffy, something so intangible, something not really having a form that is that you can touch, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the interesting thing is that culture is very tangible. Culture is money. Culture is something that you can measure. Culture is something that you can plan and implement, if you like, provided that you've got the right tools. And this is why years back, decades back, I got very much interested in the approach that Gerrit Hofstede used to have. He being an engineer by education, took up culture totally differently than people that, scholars that primarily worked with soft topics, or if you like, sociology, anthropology, etc. Being an engineer, he came into the topic looked at that through the lenses of how it is possible to compare different nations. And during his studies, he managed to develop a very robust methodology, allowing to measure and compare. And that methodology over the years has been being utilized by lots of scholars worldwide to validate the scores and the results and apply them to quite a lot of countries, covering the bigger portion of the globe. So culture in general is being defined as mental programming of a human mind, members of one group, and that mental programming would differ totally from mental programming of another group. And a group normally would be considered as a nation, which means that this would define for us basically what is good, what is bad, what is nice, what is ugly, what our value system is.
Exactly.
And the values normally would be considered as the broad preferences of one state of events over another state of events. That contradiction is pretty important. But another important moment when talking about values is that there is a loading of emotions there. So it's the differences with the emotions. And this is why national culture, as we would call it, would describe how we feel about things, what our emotions are about different behaviors, different practices, etc., etc. It doesn't necessarily have to directly translate into our behaviors. Because from the practical perspective, from the practice perspective, we as human beings are very flexible. We can behave in many different ways. But the question is how sustainable that behavior would be. Will we be able to continue behaving in that way for a long time if we have negative feelings about that? And those feelings are being defined by how we have been brought up, how we were shaped through our experiences, our family, school, religion, all the different experiences that we gather in the early years of our lives into the future. So national culture is very much about emotions, how we feel, valuations, if you like. But there is also another term that is super important, describing how we operate. And this is much more organization culture, because organization culture describes organizational practices. An popular American definition there would be, this is the way we do things over here, right? Our practices here. And the difference between one and the other is that national culture would tell me, as a Pole, Swede, or any other member of any other nation, how I feel about the practices that I'm seeing in an organization. Do I like them? Do I feel attached to them? Do I feel aligned, etc., etc.? But I take a decision whether if I should behave like that or not. If I take a decision, then I would become a member of that organization. Positive decision. I will become a member of that organization and stay there as long as my emotions are not too high. This, if you take it to a level of systems, I'd say national culture provides us the guidance for organizational culture. And organizational culture is about how organizations operate, basically. The difference also is that national culture would be very stable. The Hofstede research that was performed 50 years ago is being validated and repeated pretty regularly. The latest huge research that is very well known worldwide is the one performed at the 50th anniversary a few years ago of the original research by another Dutch scholar, repeating the results of Hofstede after 50 years, right? The different nations moved or shifted a little bit on the scale that Hofstede had developed. But the interesting thing is that the differences that is the core of culture, differences between nations, they remained the same. So this is national culture. When you talk about organizational culture, this is a much more flexible animal, I'd say, because organization will adjust their way of working, their practices, to the goals and the environment they operate in. If they change the strategy, if the market situation changes, this would influence and affect the way the organization operates. Look at the recent months. COVID has totally changed the environment that we are working. No business trips, no travels, no office very often, isolation, etc., etc. This needed to be translated into the practices of the organization. The digitalization processes of lots of industries accelerated immensely over the few weeks of the first weeks of COVID and pandemics. And it's still being continued, right? So organization cultures of the different organizations most probably are being affected, or if not affected, at least influenced, shaped in a different way. But it doesn't mean that COVID will necessarily change the national cultures. National cultures is all about the preferences, emotional preferences that are observable in huge groups of people. And that might mean that, of course, those changes in practices can lead to shifts in value systems, but that is only a possibility Plus, it will be visible in a much longer perspective than a few years, right?
Great introduction. And when I was listening to you, it was like the national culture is like who we are, and organizational culture is like our role, one of our roles. Like we have many roles, like as a parent, as an employee, or sometimes as a citizen, whatever. So so I understand that sort of national culture shapes up a little bit the way we operate, but there is a different, let's say, requirements of that role or setting, let's say. And I do agree that national culture is not changing so quickly, but you may ask any Turkish person, let's say, because I'm Turkish and I know from my surrounding that Turkey has changed. I mean, like in 50 years. I mean, like, but these are major changes, and it's now we can observe it in time, but it doesn't happen overnight. Certainly, maybe what COVID brought up changed the way we look at future, change the way we look at the trust issue or things like that. But there's also the generation issue, of course. I mean, every generation, whatever surrounds that generation is different. The technological, social, economic things may differ, definitely. So then my question will be, let's say, still a country has a lot of variation within itself. I mean, from north to south, from west to east. How do you look at that one?
When you have a proper language, you are able to describe those differences much more easily than when you lack that language. And Hofstede 6D model for national culture is the very good language, giving you the framework of 6 independent dimensions, describing the valuations or approaches to different topics that are important within social groups, right? And in that case, you are able to use that methodology to canvas the regional differences, gender differences, generation differences, urban versus rural areas differences, etc. However, when it comes to business, and this is the field that we are active in, the important is, at least from our perspective and the client's perspective, what differences there are between nations. Because if you look, work within a country, then of course you'll be able to note and notice the regional differences. But when you look from a very high, long distance, then the important moment for us is, okay, what is common for the different regions in Turkey, for example? What is common? What is the common denominator for the different generations, right? Or to what extent does the young generation, the millennials, for example, Turkish millennials, how do they differ from millennials in the States or in France? And the interesting moment there is that if you take the millennials from Turkey and let's say the baby boomers from Turkey, and you compare those two generations with the equivalent generations in France, the super interesting thing is that the difference would be exactly the same. So there would be a difference between millennials and baby boomers within Turkey, but equally big differences would be between millennials and baby boomers in France, Poland, or Russia, for example, right? So for us, the important moment is, okay, are there commonalities? Are there common denominators within a country that we can base on? Why? Because that can be translated into how different groups of people within a nation would be motivated, how they can be engaged in social activity, non-profit activity, business activity, or whatever. So what is the translation of those emotions into the motivation of people, into the engagement of people, into the patterns that would kind of define the playing field for the practices. And then jumping into the practices is answering the question how organizations set up their way of operations within the environment that is created by the nation or the society in order to be effective strategically delivering their goals. And of course, if you've got an organization in say Istanbul, setting up their or trying to figure out the optimum culture for their business, I can imagine that one of the factors that they would be taking into consideration is the influence of the local culture. I mean, national culture translated into what it means in, for example, Istanbul. An equivalent organization by the, I don't know, Syrian border, for example, would take the same aspects into consideration, but most probably that environment will be different from the one observable in, say, Istanbul. And that would mean that most probably the decisions concerning how the organization should be operated would be different in those two locations, leading to a very simple conclusion. Simple, but it's easier said than done. Simple meaning you really need to be able to visualize and describe the environment that you operate in and translate that description into how your intentions should be materialized in the way you set up your business, set up the operational practices for your business, like how the decisions are being made, whom we recruit and how we recruit people, how we reward people, for example, how we run meetings, how we interface with people within the organization, how we interface with people from outside the organization. Very tangible solutions that any manager, any leader in the organization has on the plate to take a position on, because that translates into what's most essential for any type of organization: how you create value, how you deliver the value to your stakeholders, whoever the stakeholders would be.
Another difficult question, actually, I have. Sort of the rules of the way of doing business is defined by the West, and let's say that you have to question everything. You have to, I mean, you shouldn't accept assumptions. You have to question them all the time and things like that. So, but in the Hofstede, let's say, dimensions, there is this power distance thing, and which means in East, hierarchy is very important. You don't really raise up and question the boss, whatever. And this is a mismatch between, let's say, Eastern and Western. What do you think about this one? I mean, is there a stretch? Can an Eastern country can still behave like a Western country? Does it have to? Or is there another way?
Thank you very much for this question. It's a fascinating question, as a matter of fact, because there are lots of misconceptions about that. And the misconception, the basic one, is coming from the fact that Western, or if you like, American way of looking at things have flooded the world. It flooded the world by at least two channels. One is following the money. And if this is my capital, I decide how the business that I finance are supposed to be run, full stop, right? Take it or leave it, more or less. And the second way is a little bit more subtle, but also very effective, namely through education. When you look around, very much the business education is based on American approach to business, case studies, etc., etc. Well, culture is very much like a river. No matter whether this is national culture or organizational culture, it has a flow. It runs. It's very often very calm river, but sometimes you might see that is a mountain river, white water that is speeding down, right? And what happens if you take a big stone and throw it in a river? Nothing happens. The stone will be there, but the water will find its ways. And this is what happens very often with the cultural mismatch between the practices that are being introduced and the norms, standards, beliefs, and preferences, emotional preferences that are prevailing in a given culture. You can observe that very well when you have a global company operating everywhere, having one brand name, having all the procedures, etc., common to all the country organizations, right? You go to the, let's say, United States, where the headquarters is located, you see a picture of the organization, you observe the practices, and you've got that visualization in front of you, in front of your eyes, what it is, what organization culture there is in that organization. The interesting thing starts to happen when you leave to another country, to Turkey, to China, to Russia. Suddenly you're in the same environment, but they work slightly differently because the same words mean something else in those countries. And they find their ways to kind of accept the fact that there are different expectations. Their working practices would adapt a little bit, but that wouldn't mean that their value systems would be adapted. No way. Organizational culture can obscure the national culture, but will not fully override it. It can attempt to override it, but in the long term, this will not be really sustainable, of a very simple reason. Our personal development is connected as human beings, is connected with culture, is embedded in culture, right? And it started. It all starts when we are children, infants, children, and going up on our ladder. This is very firm. You can change the value system of an adult in very few cases. Brainwashing might be the case, or critical incidents in life, right? That I reevaluate what is important for me, right? Otherwise, not really. If you believe in something, you believe in something. You can adapt the way you behave, but not really the value system. What it leads to is the fact that the nations would find their own way to cope with that, and there will be no common culture whatsoever. Look at the young people. How do you call it? Native internet or native net connection, right? They are everywhere now. Are they the same? Far from. Using the same software, using the same games, enjoying the same music. Still, they've got their own ways of looking at things, and that's a fact. When the European Union was being created, people were nationalistic groups in different countries were taking up the topic of losing the national identity, creating a common so-called European identity, etc., etc. Well, what's the result? Countries and their cultures are even clearer, stronger than before the European Union was created, right? Collaborating, having ways or having developed ways to communicate efficiently, to come to conclusions, to come to decisions, but remaining their identity. And I think that the efficient way to deal with the dilemma that you take up is to find your own way of approaching the topics, choosing the inspiration from wherever the inspiration comes, and whichever inspiration is deemed to be valuable. If you look at, for example, companies in the Far East, Japanese companies, they are very unique. And of course, some practices are repeated or replicated in Japanese companies coming from the let's say Western companies, but still they've got their own identity, no question about that. People who attempt to conquer the world, having one solution fit all, are similar to those who take the big stone, trying to throw it in the river and revert the flow of the river. Let them try, right?
Great. Well, actually, I still believe there are some human values. Of course, I don't know if you would disagree with that, but I mean, there are some even in the Eastern, let's say, culture or deep culture that we sort of forgot right now, or it's being taken an example by Western world nowadays about this mindfulness, humbleness, whatever, which is right now is taken by Westerners and cooked and
but it's coming from the East.
Served again. Yes.
Yeah. Look at how Japan
Right.
recreated value creation, if you can say so, in automotive business. As an example only, in the States, in the beginning of the 70s, Japanese quality was a joke in the eyes of Americans. And
like
then,
Chinese today, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Or a few years back, Korean, right? And they managed to, through their innovative approaches, to reshape and redevelop the notion of quality, the notion of quality assurance, the notion of innovativeness in organizations for the entire world. The wise approach is always to learn as much as you can, but adapt to the possibilities, opportunities, and circumstances that surround you where you are. This is also reflected very often in a micro approach of consultants. There are at least two different ways to attack a client, right? You can have an army of consultants that would be uniform, more or less, and you will flood a consultant and solve all the problems of that consultant. Charging lots of money for that, creating loads of paper, also electronic paper, gigabytes, but not really leaving sustainable solutions. The other approach is to enter into the organization and transfer the knowledge into the organization. Getting that knowledge, know-how, and tools into the organization, assist the organization in adopting them, and letting the organization continue with those tools.
Exactly. And it's a great time for an example right now. Can you tell us a bit story of a case of what you have achieved?
There are quite a few stories there. I don't want to bore you with that, but I will quote just one that is pretty recent and very much significant. There is that bank here in the Middle East, in the Emirates, that is called Noor Bank. It was created a few years ago in a very unfortunate moment, because it was just after the Lehman Brothers collapsed, basically, leading to the domino effect with the global financial crisis, right? And the bank was created then, and as a young organization, they were coping. Working with the Sharia law, they were established within the environment over here in Dubai. But the results were far from satisfactory for the shareholders of the organization. And that's why they started to work on finding an investor, finding a partner, etc. They hired a new CEO with a mission to turn around the bank, basically. And either to prepare the bank for an IPO, or finding an investor, with an IPO being a preferred route to follow. The CEO, Australian with the Greek roots, Johnny Osifidis, became the CEO, and his idea was that, the bank was, even though it was young, it was obsolete. Too traditional, not really focused on the market, so on the needs of the market. So he thought, okay, there is that 3-year strategy that we developed at the bank, but in order for that strategy to succeed, we need to totally turn around the culture of the bank and make it, as he would say, a technological company with a banking license instead. And he thought that the best way to do that is to do that by themselves. So he consolidated the executive team, changed people that had different vision, and consolidated the executive team, consolidated the leaders of the organization, and hired just one consultant, the Hofstede Insights, for changing helping them to transform the culture. We helped them to create a group that was called Culture Squad, coming from the entire sphere or ecosystem of the bank. People who would be culture ambassadors, change agents, Culture Squad, trained them and certified them in the multi-focus model, that is the methodology for analyzing and transforming organization culture, and help them structure the transformation process. Within 9 months of the process, they managed to hit the top numbers of all the possible market comparisons. Had the highest among all the banks in the GCC region, right? The highest increase of the total assets. The next bank having the second place on the list was half that faster than them, and the same referred to the net profits of the bank and the profit rate. In other words, the bank was named as the transformation of the year, and John became the transformation leader of the year. That continued over to 2019, and the interesting thing is that in 2019 they decided to withdraw from the process of creating an IPO, because an investor came to them and said, we don't want you to be floating on the stock exchange. We'll take over 100% of the bank. And they created the largest Sharia-based bank here in the Middle East. This was, the application of the organizational culture, but very often you would have the application of both organizational culture and national culture. For example, we are working on a huge merger between a leading chemical oil company from Saudi Arabia, from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, with their partner in Malaysia, also a leading company there, where you've got a combination of national cultures and the clash of value systems there that needs to be translated into how the joint venture placed in the Malaysian market between those two giants is supposed to efficiently being run. So all the possible angles of approach of utilizing culture in a tangible way is there.
So it's amazing story about Noor Bank, and the same people, same building, and such a big transformation. My question is, from where they got this motivation? Is it the drive? Can it be, let's say, leveraged from the culture within itself? I mean, what drove them? I mean, what was the main success factor of this change?
And that is a super interesting phenomenon. because as you know, Middle East is very, you mentioned power distance. Middle East is a region where you've got, on average, much higher power distance than in many parts of the world. And in Noor Bank's case, the root of the success was the fact that it was the leader of the organization that had a very clear picture of how the business should be being developed, what the strategy of the business is, and that strategy being anchored at the board level, but also at the executive team level in the organization. That was the leader who was the main character behind the transformation. And that was the leader who was interested in leveraging culture that is so soft into, let's say, shaping the organization in a way, allowing them to accelerate the not only the transformation, but the adoption of the new strategy that was pretty revolutionary. Without his insight that culture is either the blocking factor or the lever for strategic success, without that, translated into his resilience and his strength in spreading the vision around, nothing would happen in that organization. Not in such a short period of time, as a matter of fact. The vision is not a sufficient, it's a necessary element, but it's not a sufficient element to succeed. Apart from the vision, you need also to have the influencing possibilities, and then also the interest and ability to attack the organization on many different layers and levels in a coordinated way. You need to have a picture of where you want to go, with those intangible aspects that culture is perceived with, and if that is translated into something tangible, and then you've got the solution for the multi-layer approach, have the right people on board and get the right people on board, and then also embed the behaviors, embed the values into what you expect from your associates in the organization, then it works. Before the whole transformation was being performed, John reshaped the executive team of his organization. He got people who were very different among themselves, but that really did have that picture of the possible future for the organization, and were not afraid of going there, having all the responsibilities in their hands, not delegating that to any consultants, strategic consultants or whatsoever, just using the consultants like us, with our concepts, with our tools, with our visions in their process. They were having the steering wheel in their hands, using the engine and the oil that we provided with the vehicle that moved that organization forward. And that is not easy, because culture very often is being treated as the fifth wheel on a vehicle, right? Something that is being pushed over to the specialized units, HR or organizational development or something like that. Whilst this is a very strategic tool, and as you don't delegate managing your balance sheet, you don't delegate such strategic items as culture. You need to hold it in your hands.
And one last question about this one. So when you say about when you took this culture team and then you trained them, or you fueled them, let's say, what is? Can you give an example of? Is it about some soft skills or some behaviors?
The soft skills were there, so they normally would have the influencing capabilities within their place of within their location and hierarchy. There are people from the bottom of the organization, specialists, but there are also executives there. And what they were trained in was the language. And the language is the multi-focus model for culture and for transforming culture. So it was about providing them with the ability to visualize, analyze, and shape culture, and the process that would enable them to do that efficiently, energy-wise and time-wise. So this was the training per se, but apart from the training, there was also a mentoring process on 2 levels involved for the culture squad, but also for the executive team, so that the direction is soundly shaped, but also the implementation is safe. And they did it, and that can be safely said. They did it with a little help from their friends and little help from the methodology and tools. But this is their transformation and definitely their success.
That's exactly my view of how a consulting job should be. I mean, otherwise, it's not invented here. Otherwise, it's just people don't take it, like if they don't own it, it's just nothing happens. And a consultant may not know somebody else's job better than he does. So
exactly. The consultant does not take the responsibility for the
of course
actions. I will send an invoice. I will take my bag, prepay, and I will disappear, and you will be left and stuck with a solution that you don't really know what to do and how to do what to do with them, right? So it's not a fair way to conduct business, I'd say.
Exactly. So we come to the final question of the signature question of my podcast. We talked all the way about values, but so what is your recipe? What's your formula for creating value?
Well, I look at that through the lens of the client, as a matter of fact. And for me, it is there are a few moments that will be essential. The first moment is to really know what your success is supposed to be. To understand what your strategic parameters are, what the mission is, what the vision is, what the goals are, what your ambitions are, what your strategy is, what do you want to accomplish, and by when. Because without that, value creation would not really be something that you can achieve unless you do that by accident. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes I can go and find $100 bill laying in front of me, but that's relatively rare, I'd say. The first thing is really to have a crystallized picture of what you want to, what you're aiming at, and then to translate that into what it takes, what it really means for you, for your team, and for your organization. And in that manner, that means to translate your strategy into your organizational culture. And then when you do have those two, strategy and the equivalent in culture, you can measure what you're having today and define the gaps. Go from point A to point B, measuring how you're managing. And this is why I really love Hofstede Insight's multi-focus model for organization culture, because it gives you that possibility without much ado, without talking about things that are somewhere out there in the skies. You are having parameters describing your goals and your path. And that gives you a possibility to really influence that, because then you take up the operational decisions concerning the different elements, the different parameters, and off you go. And all that refers to a very subtle substance of people, how they relate to each other, how they relate to their work, how they relate to the external world, which is a universe in itself. I mean, this is a super complex area And the ability to, if not control, to manage that gives you really the influence upon how value can be created and how value can be increased. And that's why I like that much this approach, and been doing that for quite a few years now.
Great. Well, Piotr, thank you very much. It's been very eye-opening and very, let's say, inspiring talk. And how people can reach out to you through LinkedIn, and you have webinars, right?
Definitely webinars, LinkedIn. You can look up Hofstede Insights MENA through the webpage as well. In one go, hofstedeinsightsmena.com.
I'll give the links in the notes. Yes,
definitely. And I do hope that we'll be able to meet in the future more than once. Thank you very much indeed for having me today. It's been a definite pleasure. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much, Piotr.
Thank you very much.